Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Trafficking and Travel webinar brought to you by the GBTA Aviation Committee. My name is Stacy Montgomery, and I'm here today representing the Aviation Committee. And I want to thank all of you so much for being here and taking time to be with us today. I'm truly humbled and honored that you guys joined us today. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background. I've had the fortunate experience of volunteering at a local anti-trafficking, anti-sex trafficking organization, nonprofit here in the Dallas area, and I learned a lot from them. And they are the actual experts. They fight sex trafficking every single day. I was also able to talk to and meet with other organizations that are in the same fight. So I learned a lot. And so we decided at the Aviation Committee that with that experience, along with my over 33 years, believe it or not, 33 years in the travel industry, that we would bring you this webinar today in honor of Human Trafficking Awareness Month. So in the interest of time, I know everybody's very busy. I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into this. What we're going to cover today is what is sex trafficking. We're going to focus mostly on sex trafficking because that's where my experience is. Forced labor trafficking and sex trafficking all roll up into the category of human trafficking, but we're going to focus mostly on sex trafficking today. We're going to talk about stats on sex trafficking and forced labor trafficking and why that's underreported. And again, I'm giving you this background before we jump into the travel specific piece, just so that you have the background. We're going to talk about the interdiction for the protection of children, and what that is it's training specifically for law enforcement and first responders, and I'll explain that a little bit to you briefly. And then we'll go into a deep dive of identifying the indicators. What the indicators means is how to tell if you're in a trafficking situation, if you're witnessing a trafficking situation, or that you might be in the presence of a trafficking victim. And then I'm going to tell you how to report any suspicious activity that you might be witnessing. And then we're going to go into real case examples. This is going to be more focused on the hospitality piece of the industry. There are current civil lawsuits that are going on and lawsuits that have already been judged against. And then hopefully we'll have time for Q&A. If on the Q&A, if you'll just write your questions, use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And at the end of the presentation, we will go through those questions. Everyone that I can get to, I will answer. If there's some that I'm not able to answer, I will do my best to get with you and email you after the presentation and answer your question. Okay, so what is sex trafficking? The basic definition is it's the trade of sexual slaves. So sex trafficking is human trafficking for the purpose of sexual exploitation. Now, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000 defines it as, and I'm going to read this verbatim since it is a law, the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act. It involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to make an adult engage in commercial sex acts. And this part is very important. However, any commercial sexual activity with a minor, even without force, fraud, or coercion, is considered trafficking. So none of that has to be there for it to be trafficking if it's a minor. So understanding the shared risk and protective factors for violence can help us prevent trafficking from happening in the first place. Okay, now we're going to go into stats. We typically, in the anti-trafficking community, don't really like to talk about stats because it is so underreported. It's finally getting out into mainstream, but it is extremely underreported. So human trafficking is over $150 billion a year industry. It's actually been outpacing both the drug and gun trafficking arenas for over a decade, believe it or not. And why that is drugs and guns can be sold only once. A human being can be sold over and over. Sex trafficking victims are often sold up to 20 times a day and sometimes even more. Okay, so the 2024 stats have not come out yet, but I'm going to go ahead and go over the 2023 stats. This is from the Federal Human Trafficking Report. What I tried to do was provide you guys with sources that you could go find yourself that's public sources. so that you can go out there because there's so much detail out there. This federal human trafficking report is actually 99 pages long. What I did was I just attached a couple of executive summaries here that we could go through together. So you'll see that the defendants in 2023, 97% of them were involved in sex trafficking. So you can see how much more sex trafficking there is in forced labor. 3% in forced labor. The age range of sex trafficking victims, the oldest was 21. Now, these are just the cases that were filed, okay? Keep that in mind. The youngest was 4 years old. We've seen them even younger in the anti-trafficking world. And the average age was 15 years old. Now, with the organizations that I've talked to and I've worked with previously, the average age for victims is about 12 to 14 years old. Sex trafficking, like I said, is underreported, and especially with the open border situation, all the missing children, which we'll talk about in a little bit. It's just, there's just no idea, how many there are out there. Okay, so predators go after the most vulnerable victims, and the most common vulnerability in 2023 of the victims were drug or substance abuse. Since 2019, 128 victims of sex trafficking, they actually self-reported themselves to law enforcement. That doesn't sound like very much, but like I said, it's underreported. Okay, so for all you parents out there, please pay attention to this. The top 3 platforms identified to recruit victims were Snapchat, Facebook, and Instagram. Excuse me for just a second. All right. Now, Snapchat, Facebook, and Instagram, I mean, those, some of you may be surprised by that. You probably think, oh, I thought that was all on the dark web. I mean, these predators are on every single platform you can imagine. They've even figured out how to prey on minors on Spotify. And it just blows my mind. But they love the gaming sites as well. For younger kids, you've got Roblox. There's been so many news stories about how many minors, have been exploited on Roblox, Discord, all of those. So please pay attention. Since we're kind of focusing on the travel piece, I didn't include the social media stuff that I normally talk about, but I just want to bring that up. I mean, it's just make sure you are aware of who your children are talking to. And since 2019, the Cash App has been the most commonly identified payment platform used in these cases. All right, continuing on the stats. So the primary investigative agencies that were involved in these cases was 41% FBI, 22% HSI, 17% state or local agency, and then you can just read the rest of these. In 2023, the average term of imprisonment for defendants sentenced in trafficking cases was 147 months. So it doesn't seem like really that long. Changing and updating legislation is important. I just wanted to bring this up. Some of the anti-trafficking groups that I've worked with, they really know what they're doing, because we can go after, traffickers all day long, but we have very weak legislation. For example, did you know that traffickers currently do not have to register as sex offenders? Doesn't that just seem crazy to you? So when they get out in 6 months, they're able to go rent an apartment and continue trafficking out of an apartment because they didn't have to register as a sex offender. There's so many different legislative bills that these anti-trafficking groups are trying to help politicians and the government either, update or completely have new bills in place to protect the victims and help law enforcement actually make these cases go through. It's just such weak legislation, and I don't know why we haven't caught up with that. So just to give you an idea, 10 sex trafficking defendants received life in prison. Again, it doesn't seem like very much, but with the weak legislation and other factors, which we'll go into in a little bit, it's just, we have an uphill battle here. But the conviction rate for the cases that were brought was 96%. This report has reported that a total of over $27 million has been paid as restitution to victims in 2023. And you can see how long these cases take. 500, the average is 570 days. Okay, and again, these are kind of off in my opinion, but we'll go through them. The victim nationality is saying that 93% were US citizens or their nationality was unknown, and 7% is foreign national. Again, with open borders, these are not accurate figures. We have no idea who's come over here. Right now, we have over 350,000 missing illegal immigrant children. Tom Homan is actually reporting it's closer to 500,000. So if we don't know these kids or these other victims are out there, how do you count them? We've already gone over the age range of the sex trafficking victims. Would like to point out the victims, it says 15 adult males. Again, these are just cases that came forward and were prosecuted. 9 minor males, 15 adult males, 99 adult females, 151 minor females. I would like to say that what we're being told is on average, sex trafficking victims, 84% are female, 15% are male, and 1% are transgender. All right, we've already gone over that other stuff. We already talked about the differences in sex and forced labor trafficking. And you can see the number of cases filed between 2019 and 2023. It's just amazing to me that we only have 200 to 300 cases nationwide. Hopefully that's going to change with legislation and other factors. The victim type in 2023, minor victims was at 48%, adult victims was at 16%. The majority are minors. Percentage of buyer defendants. What this means is buyers that were actually prosecuted, not the actual trafficker, but the buyers of the sex. The percentage was 35%. And then there's the average age of defendants. You can see if they were charged with actual sex trafficking, their average age was 37. The buyers, if they were charged, their average age was 44. And then if they were charged with forced labor trafficking, was 47. Now, this next graph is interesting because look at the registered sex offender defendants. The defendants in sex, only 4% of them were registered as a sex offender. And the buyer defendants, only 5%. Okay, so the reasons for underreporting, I already talked about the weak legislation in place to prosecute these traffickers. Also the age of consent in some states. For instance, in Texas, the age of consenting to sex is 17 years old. But a 17-year-old more than likely will still be in high school. So 17-year-olds is a very, very common age that these traffickers target because they know that it's very difficult to prosecute because they can just say, well, she consented to doing this. So in Texas, some of these anti-trafficking groups are working with the legislators to try to change that to where if they are still in high school, then they are considered a minor. Now, we've had parents say, oh, well, what if they go after my son and because they're having sex in high school? No, that's not what these groups are going after. They're going after forced, commercial sex trafficking is what they're going after. So this is the type of legislation that I'm talking about. One of the biggest ones is victims do not want to testify out of fear or allegiance. A lot of times the trafficker threatens the actual victim, but also their families. Their families are threatened. So they're very scared to step forward and testify against the trafficker. I mentioned before that the traffickers go after, the vulnerable. And so many victims come from neglected homes where, they didn't have any money or they were neglected, substance abuse problems with the parents, whatever it is. And so they actually don't feel like they're victims. They feel like they've been saved. Oh, yeah, they have to do this, but they got a new purse every month, and they get their nails done all the time. And the trafficker makes sure, that they have new clothes and all those types of things. So again, like I said, it's an uphill battle sometimes. Also, district attorneys, depending on where they're located, a lot of them have their different guidelines of what they need as evidence. They also want a slam dunk. A lot of them, treat it like it's just prostitution, again, because the victims do not want to testify or they're saying that they are not a victim. The law enforcement and the groups that I've worked with, law enforcement is very good. You know, this whole, defund the police did not help the situation. Law enforcement does the best they can, and they are actually great for the most part. But come to find out, most of them are not trained on how to identify actual trafficking situations. They're doing so many things. They get pulled in so many directions, domestic violence call, car crash, all those types of things. They haven't really been trained, and they're just pulled in so many different directions, and they're so underfunded as well. And very few departments, they have very few agencies that have departments or even just one person that's dedicated to identifying and going after sex traffickers. We already talked about the open borders. There's so much involved in all that. We won't get into all of that, but just think about all the people coming over, what's going on that we don't know about. It's not a good situation. So the key takeaway on this is that it's unreported. So if you see something, please say something. Do not be scared to say something, report it. And we're going to go over on how to report it here in just a little bit. I had talked about how law enforcement, I'm not saying all of law enforcement, don't take that the wrong way, but I've met some law enforcement officers that were so happy to hear about this program, which I was surprised that they didn't know about. But it's called, and I'm bringing this up to you guys just in case you happen to have family members or friends that meet, these categories of being law enforcement. When I say law enforcement, that could be district attorneys, EMTs and firefighters, those are first responders, even park rangers, anti-trafficking groups that actually have some of this type of training. They're allowed to go to this class as well. But it's the Interdiction for the Protection of Children. And who started this was actually the Department of Public Safety in Texas. And it's 2 full days of class, and it's free of charge to those that go to the class. And again, but you have to meet that criteria to be able to go. But it's multidisciplinary training from BPS, law enforcement, victim services, prosecutors, and also CPS. And DPS will actually travel to your location. I remember when I went to the training a couple of years ago in Little Greenville, Texas, the trainers at DPS that were going to train us had just gotten back from St. Croix. They had traveled to St. Croix to do a class there. So I was like, oh, wow, you have to go from St. Croix to Greenville. But they will travel to your location, take care of everything, do the training, free of charge, if you have at least 50 attendees. So what we had done in Greenville, Texas, was we had the captain of the local police department there had sent off the invitation to the counties surrounding him, and there was about 100 people in that class. I also wanted to mention that there's 80 fusion centers in the United States. What fusion centers do, they're actual buildings, and all the different law enforcement agencies are located in those buildings, and there's 80 across the United States, and they share information. And this is one of the ways you can actually report, any trafficking that you might be suspicious of. And what comes through those fusion centers is SARS, suspicious activity reports. How you can find a fusion center in your area, you can go to the dhs.gov/fusion-centers. But they are 80 across the United States. I just wanted to give you guys that information so you have that in case you have any family or friends that are in law enforcement. Okay, now we're going to trafficking indicators. This is going to be a lot of information, so please bear with me. So first, we're going to go over the indicators, and this is how to tell if you might be in the presence of a trafficking victim or witnessing a trafficking situation. And this is for all of the travel industry and also travelers that are traveling for business or personal. I'm not going to go over every single one of these in the interest of time, but you can see that a lot of them will overlap into the other slides as well, just FYI. But if you're seeing somebody, when I talk about this is if you're seeing somebody that's acting in this way. They have no control of their own identification, documents, tickets, boarding passes, money, and phone. They seem to be very submissive to a traveling companion or seem controlled. And they have no freedom of movement, like they can't go to the restroom by themselves. They may be traveling with few or no belongings, like they don't have a purse or wallet, especially for long distance travel. We've even seen victims that are using a trash bag as their luggage. A third party insists on speaking for them. They're not allowed to speak for themselves. Their answers may seem like you're scripted or rehearsed. Let's see, they have signs of burdens, tattoos, or branding to denote ownership. Many of these traffickers, they brand their victims because they consider them their property. I have seen, I put the barcode picture over here just so you could see, but I've seen victims that have been branded with barcodes, especially on the back of their necks, or they'll be branded with the initials of the trafficker, or maybe a gang affiliated, logo or whatever you call that. They might have signs of physical and emotional abuse, signs of neglect, malnourishment, poor hygiene, sleep deprivation, etc. They may seem intimidated or mentally shut down. They exhibit fearful, anxious, depressed, nervous, all that type of paranoid and submissive behavior. They don't know where they are and they don't even know where they're going. They may appear drugged, disassociated, disoriented, or to have lost sense of time or location. We're continuing on just with all of the travel industry and travelers. A minor who does not appear to be accompanied by their legitimate parent or guardian. Minors traveling during the school day. A child or person within a family appearing particularly unkept and uncared for. They appear to be with a group of girls traveling with an older, unrelated adult. They're trying to falsify their age. They are wearing improper clothing for weather or their travel route. They reference that they've traveled to a lot of different cities or towns. They're using false identities or travel documents. They might have a language barrier with their travel companion. They appear to be with a noticeably older romantic partner. They offer to exchange sex for transportation, food, shelter, or assistance. Sometimes, they're scared of, authority or law enforcement as well. They might show signs of being in possession of drugs or stolen property. And I wanted to mention that, all of this can be found on the Department of Transportation website. Okay, here are just some, different, like for aviation and ground, specific ones. In aviation, the person or the child may not know who purchased their ticket or who is picking them up, and may not even appear to know who is traveling with them. They may be traveling on a one-way, last-minute, or same-day booking paid by someone else. And again, see, these are overlapping, traveling with little or no money or personal items. Comes from a location known as a primary source or destination for trafficking. They don't even know what's in their actual checked baggage. And as I mentioned, many of the other indicators mentioned on the previous slides. And then like rail and ground, it's the same thing, that has no idea who purchased their ticket. And again, traveling on a one-way, last-minute, same-day booking paid by someone else. And the ride share and taxi is the same information. Okay, this is going to be the big one because the hospitality industry, there's like 3 slides on this one. So this first slide are the indicators just for the general staff at hotels, motels, and the hospitality industry. So we're going to go through these kind of a little bit more in detail because this is where a lot of the trafficking takes place, and it's just because hotels are very easy to get to and utilize for this type of transaction. The victim may appear to be deprived of food, water, sleep, medical care, or other necessities. Again, acting fearful or anxious. They may have bruises or other signs of physical trauma. Again, we talked about tattoos and scars. They may have signs of self-harm or suicidal tendencies. They're deferring to someone else to speak for them. Again, their responses are rehearsed. They have a very difficult time providing logical answers to basic questions like, where are you from? Where are you going? Those types of things. Again, exhibit evidence of verbal threats, emotional abuse. They seem to be with a boyfriend, girlfriend, or romantic partner that is much older. We already talked about a group of girls traveling with an older male or female. They may be dressed inappropriately for their age or maybe in out-of-season clothing. They have no control over money or IDs. And they may reference someone in the group being their sugar daddy, sugar mama, or refer to themselves as a sugar baby. I'd like to bring up here too, there's some other terms that were kind of wild to me, like stable. The trafficker likes to call the group of girls or boys that are in his control, that are, that he's trafficking, he calls them his stable. So if you ever hear that, that's an interesting one. We already talked about traveling to other towns frequently. And they talk about maybe getting paid very little or not at all for all the work they do. Where you can find all of this information is at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, their Blue campaign. Okay, so now we're still in the hospitality industry, and this is housekeeping, maintenance, and room service staff. These are very important. Is there a room that they're using the do not disturb sign constantly? Are they requesting additional towels, new linens, sheets, etc., multiple times a day? But they're also denying the staff entry into the room. They're refusing cleaning services for multiple days. If you are able to get in, you see a lot of cash in the room, or multiple computers, cell phones, credit card readers, etc. Are they reserving multiple rooms? And also, are they asking for a room on the first floor near the exit door? Leaving the room infrequently, not at all, or at odd hours, but you also, on the flip side, can see is there a lot of activity? Are you seeing that door open a lot during the day and the evening, and strangers going in and out? Do they possess children's items or clothing without having a child registered with the room? They're loitering in the hallways and appear to monitor the area. They have a lot of alcohol or illegal drugs in their room. This is another important one. Possess evidence of pornography or sex paraphernalia. Like there's a lot of different used condoms, or not even used, but new condoms, lubricant, lotion, etc. Leave minors alone in the room for long periods of time. Again, have extensive number of people staying in the room. They have multiple possessions. Allow a constant flow of people into a room at all hours. Keep the room stocked with merchandise, luggage, mail packages, and purses and wallets with different names. And they're loitering in the parking lot, lobby, etc. There is a 10-page trafficking response guide for the hospitality industry available through the Blue campaign through the Department of Homeland Security website. If you want to go look at that, that's also available to you. Okay, hospitality industry, front desk, bellhop, security, and valet staff. Some of these, again, will overlap. Are they paying for the room with cash? Use hotel computers for adult-oriented or sexually explicit websites. They seem unforthcoming about their full name, address, or vehicle information. Appear with a minor that he or she did not come with originally. They rent pornography when children are staying in the room, have repeated visitors, particularly those dropped off at the hotel. Have no identification or use an ID that is not theirs. Or they rent the room by the hour. That's a big one. Or for less than a day. And it just doesn't appear normal. They rent a room with fewer beds than patrons. This is the one I talked about before. Enter, exit through the side or rear entrances instead of the lobby, or attempt to prop open exit doors. And also, they may park their car in the parking lot so that the license plate is not visible. There's just a lot of things that you can kind of just be observant about. Okay, how do you report suspicious activity? So if you suspect something, say something. You can call the Homeland Security Investigations tip line, and I provided the number there. If you don't want to talk to anybody, you can submit an anonymous tip via the website that I provided there. If it's an emergency situation, please call 911. So if you see somebody in immediate harm or having a medical problem or whatever, you need to call 911. But if you suspect something might be going on, whether it be at a hotel or even down the street on where you live, I mean, please report it. You're not going to get in trouble if it doesn't turn out to be trafficking. Now, this is if you suspect a trafficking situation. Now, victims of trafficking should call the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and I've provided that number there. I'd like to note that posters and other materials, including training videos that you guys can go access, are available on the Blue Campaign website that I mentioned before. And I gave you an example of one of the posters or cards that you can hand out for reporting human trafficking. So again, the key takeaway is do not be afraid to speak up. Please report it. You may save someone. Do not be afraid you might be wrong. Okay, now we're going to close out with real cases. I just wanted to talk about how you can protect yourself. This is especially for the hospitality industry because hotels are being found liable. And there's a lot of litigation going on now because they're being charged with knowing it's going on on their property and not doing anything about it. So I just wanted to give you some examples of some cases and go through those, and then we'll close out with Q&A if we have the time. All right. So why hotels, we're going to do the summary of it first, but why are hotels experiencing a surge of trafficking lawsuits? The reason is it's the ease of access for buyers and the ability to pay in cash and maintain secrecy through finances. It's just the ease of it. Plus, hotels, I mean, the revenue streams and operations are increasingly being automated. You've got automatic check-in and check-outs. You've got the apps on your phone. You've got third-party reservation system, non-mandatory registration and identification. It also provides guest privacy and anonymity. All of these factors prevent hoteliers and staff members from knowing the real identity of their customers or what they are doing behind closed doors. It's just everything's becoming so automated. It's so easy to kind of hide in the shadows. And how are hotels becoming more involved in trafficking? According to the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, hotels have a legal responsibility to maintain safe premises and take the proper precautions to keep guests safe. How they're also being involved in trafficking cases is the staff's failure to intervene after noticing signs of trafficking. They may be allowing the crime to occur in exchange for financial gain. This has happened. And again, participation from the employees in the trafficking taking place. How to fight this is providing ongoing training and education to your employees. It's essential to take steps to protect your business. These lawsuits, I mean, we're talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars. So how you can protect yourself, we talked a little bit about this, but the American Hotel and Lodging Association, they have a No Room for Trafficking campaign. I provided where you can go download that information, but I did put the top bullet points on what they say you can do. We already talked about training staff on what to look for and how to respond. Displaying human trafficking indicator signage, establishing a company-wide policy, ongoing coordination with law enforcement, sharing success stories and best practices. Education awareness is essential to fighting this, you guys. So just, ongoing training, just talking about it, sharing best practices, being observant. That's your key takeaway. Just, be observant, train your employees, just be proactive so you don't have any of these civil suits come against you. Okay, here's just some cases. We're going to go through these. I did my best not to actual name the hotel chain or the property because I didn't want to do that since we are on a travel seminar. So I've just kind of been vague about who was charged on these cases. An Inn property chain settled with 4 women that filed a trafficking case against them in December of 2023. The lawsuit alleged that the traffickers relied on hotel staff to alert them if police were in the area. It states hotel employees accepted money and drugs in exchange for helping traffickers by serving as a lookout. This was in the Atlanta area. And then in Philadelphia, a hotel owner was required to pay $24 million to 8 trafficking survivors after the court ruling. 4 human trafficking survivors filed federal lawsuits against a large motel chain in Texas. More than 40 individual trafficking lawsuits have been filed against several hotel and motel chains through one Ohio law firm. Bay Area hotels accused of ignoring sex trafficking on premises, lawsuit December 2024. 2 motels in Hinesville, Georgia, being sued for allowing a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old girl to be trafficked. The suit alleges the girls were drugged, beat daily, forced to have sex for money, raped, and continually sold to sex buyers at the motels. A motor inns chain had 2 settlements against them in February 2024, 2 victims ages 16 and 17. They were awarded $24.5 million, and that was in Philadelphia. In another Pennsylvania case, and in October 2023, with the same chain, 3 victims were awarded $37.5 million. Even if you can afford the money, can you afford the bad press, right? Okay, so here's some more cases. In August 2024, a landmark child sex trafficking case was filed in Florida against a mother trafficking her 15-year-old. 10 people were eventually charged with the crime, as well as several hotel chains who have been accused of failing to stop it. It is also claimed that a popular large client reporting management platform, CRM, they supplied the technological framework for the trafficking transactions. And another one in August of 2024, multiple Washington state properties were charged for facilitating trafficking. One victim claims to have been trafficked at these properties all the way from 2007 to 2014. And other victims claim they were trafficked from 2012 to 2023. The inn chain mentioned on the previous slide has also been accused by victims who have been trafficked at 118 of their locations in 40 states, and I've provided the map below. So again, I cannot stress the importance of training your staff at all levels, just being proactive. As long as you're proactive and showing that you're trying to train your staff, it's never going to be completely avoided. You can't be everywhere all the time, but if you're showing that you're being proactive, putting, processes in place, doing ongoing training for your employees, doing background checks on your employees, those types of things, being very observant, you'll have a much better case if there is a civil suit, against you. I know that was a lot of information, and even though I'm from Texas, sometimes I can talk fast, but I just, the Aviation Committee and myself, we want to thank you so much for joining us today. We'll go into the Q&A now. If anybody, let me go look. I haven't had a chance to look here. Hold on just a second. Oh, I don't see any questions. If anybody has any questions, if you could please type them in the Q&A. Wow, this is the first. Okay, I guess you guys do not have any questions. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. Have a great rest of the week. Thank you.